Welcome again to Cottage Talk. I am Russ Goldman. Joining me right now is Tony Gold. This is our post-match show, Fulham's 1-0 victory against Nottingham Forest. It is entitled Marco Silva, and the players get it right against Nottingham Forest. And I feel very strongly about that, and that's the reason why I put that in the title. And we'll talk about the reasons why I feel this way during the show. And we have a lot to talk about. We have some really good stuff to break down. We'll break down the match in the second half of the show. But in the first half of the show, I have some really good Cottage Talk talking points that I want to go through with Tony. And what's great about doing this show with him and going through these talking points is that I like to present a post-match show differently than probably the majority of the post-match shows you either listen to or watch. I like to discuss things that I'm thinking about before the match, during the match, and after the match. And that's why I have this section, and we're going to go through it during the show. Before I go on any further, I want to welcome my co-host back to the show. Mr. Gold, how are you doing?
Very well, Russ. Very well. Looking forward to getting into it. Good evening, Wayne. Nice to see you. Happy Christmas to you and your families as well.
Absolutely, Wayne. Thank you so much for joining us. And everyone, of course, Chris joins us as well. Good evening, Chris. And
Chris.
Thank you so much for joining us as well. And hopefully we'll get a decent live audience. I do want to mention, as always, the post-match show will always be free. I just want to mention that. It is free. But if you want more from Cottage Talk, please do check out the Cottage Talk Patreon page. I would highly recommend, because I'm putting up a lot of stuff on the Cottage Talk Patreon page. It's reasonably priced. Check it out. If you want to know when we go live, a great way to do that is to subscribe on YouTube. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. All right, enough of that. Tony, give me your opening thoughts on, I'm going to call a massive 3 points for Fulham. Not pretty. But there's a lot to talk about in regards to this match. Some good things for us really to discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, it wasn't one for the purists, that's for sure. But like I said, we talked about it pre-match about, it wasn't so much about the performance. It was about getting the 3 points and making sure that we did that. And, that Fulham did it. And not only that, they got the bonus of a clean sheet. I thought Forest were absolutely woeful, if I'm perfectly honest. But, you've got to credit Fulham to a degree on that as well. Some very good positives from the game. Still some negatives that need to be ironed out and sorted out, especially with particular individuals. But look, at the end of the day, Russ, we got one more game before the new year. That 3 points last night has put us in a much better position. And yeah, look, it's a couple of sort of changes in certain things, and actually, Fulham can sort of hang around or stick around it in the next sort of 3 or 4 games when the lads come back from the AFCON. Actually, for the first time in a very, very long time, we should be able to push on and have a really strong finish to the season, which will be nice for a change. But yeah, look, as I said, last night, not a game for the purists, but we got the result and a massive 3 points.
Absolutely, Tony. And listen, I'm glad that you talked about it in those terms, talking about the fact that if they can continue to get points, whether they're draws, I would prefer some serious victories in the coming weeks. If they're able to do that and they have some momentum, and dare I say, add in the January transfer window, and then these players come back. And oh, by the way, there are 2 other players that are going to be coming back that are not part of the AFCON trio. That would be Ryan Sessegnon and Rodrigo Muniz coming back from injury. You put all that together, if the players now can, what we would say here, hold down the fort and continue to get points, Tony, the season can change like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And also not forgetting that there might be a couple of signings as well in January, you'd hope, right, to bolster up, what we have. And there are some good players available, Russ, in January. Really good players available. I've tweeted out a few in the last few weeks. There's a couple in the Championship, actually, that I'd be going after because I think they are viable, realistic. And, you could get those players at a good price. So, yeah, all in all, as long as, the backroom staff and Marco and the directors at Fulham have got their stuff together, and hopefully identified a few people. Then, as I said, with those AFCON guys coming back, Sessegnon being fit, Muniz coming back in Feb, hopefully maybe earlier. I said we should be able to have a really good end to the season. There's no reason why not.
What's interesting, and we'll talk about this during the show, because I definitely not just want to focus on Fulham, but I want to talk about, you already brought up, and we'll be in our Cottage Talk talking points about Nottingham Forest. If you look at the players that they have and the players that they have coming off the bench, they have some talented players and some players that Fulham were linked to. And I'll just name a couple: Zinchenko and Douglas Luiz. Tony, I'm actually glad that Fulham did not get either one of these guys, because I got to tell you, they were both poor. Now, Zinchenko came off the bench. I've seen some stuff that he has lost his legs. Basically, again, his situation is a little bit different, but Douglas Luiz is the player I wanted. And Tony, I wouldn't want him now at Fulham.
Yeah, look, I mean, Sean Dyche will be very disappointed with how his team performed last night. That they are much better than that performance shown from pretty much half the squad, if not all of it. Notoriously, as we know, Forest don't do well at Craven Cottage, and it was proven again there last night. Certainly, a lot of their players underperformed. Look, Arsenal don't let players go for a reason, and when they do, more than likely that they've come to the end of their career. So Zinchenko, you can see that, and obviously he's not playing regularly, so that always tells, that always shows. And yeah, I mean, Douglas Luiz, he's a good player, but he wouldn't get into this Fulham side, is the honest truth at the moment. So it's an interesting look at contrast in terms of players, because you look at them, you think, well, Morgan Gibbs-White, you definitely take him all day long. Murillo at the back, you definitely take him all day long. I thought he was their best player, but really, they massively underperformed. Didn't take advantage of Fulham, who in spells did okay, right, but also didn't perform particularly well, really, if we're being honest. And we'll talk about that and we'll come on to it. But like I said, at the end of the day, it's about getting points on the board, Russ. It's about winning the game. And Fulham did what they had to do to win it.
Absolutely. And that's what we're going to discuss next. And like I said, I've got several topics for us to dive into in Cottage Talk talking points. And basically, they're takeaways. They're takeaways from the match that we can really debate, talk about, and hopefully if you're watching live and have the ability to comment, feel free to. I have to start here, Tony, because this is something that you have been harping on ever since you've done Cottage Talk. We're talking second season of doing Cottage Talk. You've been talking about clean sheets. Tony, Fulham kept a clean sheet. And I think with the players that are missing, with the situation at hand, I think it was vital. And I'm going to talk about Marco and his tactics, because I think that they're a factor here. But when it comes down to it, we have to talk about the performances themselves, right? And you've been critical of Anderson. I've been critical of him. I thought he played very well. Defensively, I thought they got the job done. And I'll ask you this question when we talk about a clean sheet. Besides the opportunity from Murillo, which was from 30 yards out, can you name another opportunity that Nottingham Forest had? I can't. And I have to say, a lot of that has to do with Fulham's defense. And I don't think that Bernd Leno had much to do. So we can criticize it when it deserves to be. But I want to look at the clean sheet and analyze what we saw, because I think it's so vital that they got this, Tony. Absolutely.
Listen, Russ, I love a clean sheet, at the end of the day, because if you get a clean sheet, you don't lose football matches. Interestingly enough, Nottingham Forest had 51% of possession last night. We had 49%, but they didn't really do much with it. And, both teams had 10 attempts, on 10 attempts on goal effectively. But that was 10 attempts off target. Believe it or not, Russell, Fulham didn't register one shot on target last night in 90 minutes. Not one. And that tells its own story. Nottingham Forest, as you said, had two. And Leno didn't really have anything to do. Their goalkeeper certainly didn't have anything to do. But listen, I've been constructive criticism of Anderson, Joachim Anderson, because for me, Russell, when you pay £30 million for a defender, there's a certain expectation that comes with that. And I don't believe, in my opinion, that he has performed consistently enough in that time since he's come back to Fulham. He's had some very good games. He's had some mediocre games, and he's had some absolutely terrible games. To his credit, last night was one of his better games. I think that, and I said this before, I think that actually Cuenca playing alongside him has made a little bit of a difference in terms of him getting exposed, because Bassi sometimes is so quick to want to break out of defence and charge forward, and he's very erratic in the way that he defends. Sometimes that exposes Anderson, and I've noticed it, quite a lot. He does get exposed, but actually Cuenca is much more disciplined, and I thought those two worked really well last night. Right. I think Anderson's decision making was far better than it's been. He read the game very well. He was positionally much better. So yeah, all in all, and I think that actually Robinson and Tete did their jobs as fullbacks relatively well, and as a collective, they were much more solid than they were against Newcastle and Burnley. That's for sure. Okay. Hence the clean sheet. And the other thing is that we did very well last night, Russell, is that we defended set pieces much better than we have done in previous games.
And we're going to talk about that. That is definitely one of our talking points. Thank you so much for bringing that up. I actually was reading some stuff this morning, and I can't remember where I read it, but they were talking about the strategy of Marco Silva. We're going to be talking about that coming up next, that he didn't have his fullbacks bombing forward. And I kind of noticed that too. So I think that was also part of this strategy by Marco to be more defensive against this team. Now, again, I'm going to tell you right now, I think I've seen this movie before. I think I saw this at the City Ground last year. I think he has set Fulham up like this against this team before. I don't think this is unusual. I think this was, Tony, I think it was partially by design.
Yeah, and I said it made a difference, because there's a time and a place when you want your fullbacks, overlapping, getting into the final third, creating overloads, all of that sort of thing. But there's a time and a place. And unfortunately, Fulham haven't been dominant enough. They haven't taken control of games early enough and capitalised on that in order for them to be so gung-ho and allow their fullbacks to bomb on. Last night, they were much more disciplined. I think Forest had good moments in the game, but they never really threatened. And the reason they didn't threaten is because our shape was much better, and individual players did their jobs to the levels that we expect. So, yeah, as I said, defensively, we weren't really troubled, but Anderson seemed to be a bit more of a leader last night. He seemed to be a little bit more at it. And I believe that Cuenca coming in has made that slight difference. I really do believe that.
No, that's great. And listen, I'm glad that you brought that up, because I want to really focus on this a little bit more. Because you look at the players that they have and ask yourself while you're watching, and if you're listening or watching the show, Morgan Gibbs-White, Callum Hudson-Odoi, Hutchinson on the other end, Jesus in front of them as the striker. How dangerous were they? And Morgan Gibbs-White is a player that honestly scares me to death. And they were all nullified, Tony.
Yeah, look, as I said, I just think they were poor, Russell. I don't think Fulham were equally as poor at times. You've got to remember, the goal that won the game was a penalty in the 45th minute.
Oh, I know.
That was what won the game. It wasn't anything brilliant that Fulham did, in the 90 minutes. They didn't open Forest. They didn't carve them open. They didn't, cause any major problems. But Forest were equally as poor in those situations. And, Sean Dyche will be looking at and thinking, he had to get something from that game last night. And he's going to be extremely disappointed with that performance, because, Fulham had come away from that game with a loss. We would be talking a completely different, we'd be having a completely different conversation right now. Yep. But ultimately, we got that moment and, we took advantage of it. But in terms of the actual game over 90 minutes, in terms of chances and quality, there really wasn't much from either team, if we're being perfectly honest.
True, Tony. But I'm going to make the argument, like, I agree with what you're saying, but I actually think Fulham were set up a certain way that led to this. And I don't think that Deitch set his team up for this. I think he probably wanted more play from the wingers, and he certainly did not get that. And that's why I wanted to talk a little bit more about Marco Silva. And listen, I will criticize him when he deserves to be, and I'll praise him when he does. And I'm going to praise him here. We're going to talk about coming up in just a bit. Another talking point will be focusing on Tom Kearney coming on, because I thought that was a turning point of the match. I'll talk about that. That's part of this, but it goes beyond this. It's how Fulham were set up. Fulham were, again, defensively sound, didn't offer a lot, but you know what? They all had a role to play. This is a team effort, and I want to give Marco a lot of credit. And I also think, Tony, that he set them up with the substitutes. I thought he got everything right against Sean Deitch, and I think he won the coaching battle. Your thoughts?
Yeah, listen, they had a key player out. We had key players out. At the end of the day, Marco Silva sets us up a certain way. Forest have to find a way to, combat that. They didn't. I thought that, the first half was better than the second half from Fulham's perspective, if we're being honest. I think that on the ball, we weren't particularly great at times. We turned over possession quite a lot, gave away balls cheaply, which did put us under a little bit of pressure, but we managed with it, we coped with it, and we dealt with it. And then, throughout the game, individuals did have some good moments. Kevin had a few good moments. Smith, I thought, was effective all night and played well. Harry Wilson, did his bit. Raul worked tirelessly, as he always does every single game. So yeah, look, I think that, I think the big change last night for me, Russell, the moment that Marco Silva really nailed it was when he took off Sander Berger after getting that yellow card and brought on Tom Kearney. And that for me was the moment that actually changed the game for us in terms of control and managing to see the game out.
Okay. And I'm going to go there now, because you brought that up, and let's just talk about this. Let's focus on this. And I agree with you 100%, Tony. Second half begins. For the probably first 15 minutes, I'm thinking they're going to score here. It's inevitable. The ball kept coming back. The ball kept coming. They could not get out of their half. And you got to give Forrest a little bit of credit. But I thought, how long can they withstand this? So Marco makes the change, and he brings on Kearney. So anyone that's watched the match will see how everything changed. I've heard talk about it. So let's get your view. Before Kearney comes on to when he comes on, what you saw.
Yeah, like I said, I just think that we were a little bit erratic. We were trying to move the ball too quickly at times. And with that, when you start to force it, you start to give the ball away because you become kind of desperate. And I think there was a lot of forced passes in the middle. And I think really Silva would have been looking at thinking, I need to get someone in the middle. Obviously, Iwobi's not there. I need to get someone that's going to come on the ball, slow it down, take touches, move it in the right areas, and just make good decisions. And then obviously when Sander Berg picked up that yellow card, that was the opportunity for him to do that. So obviously Kearney comes on, and the minute he stepped onto the pitch, Russ, there was the impact straight away. He slowed it down. He gave us a bit of quality on the ball. He started to take more control in midfield, and suddenly we weren't panicking, and we suddenly looked and took control of the game and took all the momentum away from Nottingham Forest. And that was down to literally Kearney coming, because it's his game intelligence. It's the experience that he has, and he's able to do that.
Right. And it's funny because I'm thinking about this, right? It's the intelligence. He can still offer you this, and he can basically control the game with his passing, but like you said, with his brain, right? So I'm going to just go off topic a little bit, because you and I have been talking a great deal about King and Smith Rowe playing together. So let's take Kearney out of it. Let's take Berga out of it, and we have Lukic holding, and we put King in that role that Tom Kearney played. Now, Tom Kearney does not have the legs. He does not have the physicality, right? But he offers you something. I've asked you this before. In the 8 role, can Josh King do not what Tom Kearney did, did, but actually offer possibly a more dynamic number 8. And I don't think we need this double pivot. That's kind of where I'm going on this.
Listen, when Fulham become a little bit more secure with points, and that threat of being in a relegation dogfight becomes a distant memory, I think we will start to see Josh King and Emil Smith-Rowe together at some point in midfield, because I think it makes sense, Russ. I really do. I think it will give us so much more options, so much more quality in the final third. And you've got two. Look, Smith-Rowe has got himself back up to a level, right, in terms of his fitness. He's looking sharper. He did things last night that people might not necessarily notice or even think about. But the way that he drops into space, finds pockets, gets on the ball, keeps it simple, moves it, and just keeps the ball ticking over. And that is priceless at times. And then when you've got the exuberance of Josh King coming in there,
yeah.
And you don't need Berger and Lukic together anymore. You won't need them. You won't need them.
And that's been my point. And that's why I kind of wanted to talk about this. Even though we're talking about Kearney, I think it also shows that you don't need these two together. You don't need the two of them together, because I think in some ways it can backfire you, like we saw at the beginning of the second half. Kearney was the right call, but I'm thinking more big picture. How do we get these two players? Chris is saying switch them around. ESR play the 8 and Josh King play the 10. I think you can mix and match that. I think you can play around with that. But
I think the rotation is really important, Russ, because if you got it rigid, then it becomes very, structured. And actually, Josh King and Smith-Rowe thrive off of having the ability to go and express themselves.
The freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. And you want them to express themselves. They are footballers that can create, and you want your creative players to have that freedom.
Yeah, I totally agree. Let's see. I just want to share this comment from Peter. It says, Iwobi played deeper today, him, Smith-Rowe, and King in a 3. You and I have talked about this. Peter, we've actually talked about this on Cottage. Thank you so much for the comment. I would love to see this at some point.
And I think we will. I genuinely do. As I said, once the season moves on and Fulham have, got out of that issue of being in a dogfight, then maybe, as I said, Silva becomes a little bit braver, and he may start to look at that. And I think it's a good option, and I think it's the way forward.
Okay, very good there, my friend. Okay, I do want to talk a little bit about, you've already mentioned, listen, I've been talking to people, and I've also been watching and listening to a bunch of Nottingham Forest podcast and video. And as you can imagine, they're very upset. They've been very critical of their players, and they were poor. But I also don't want it to all be about them, because I think, and again, I'm using that term, but I don't like to use the term we, but I am going to use we. I'm talking about Fulham. I think they were I'm sorry, boy, I'm doing this we thing again. The players were a factor. I'm talking about the Fulham players in Nottingham Forest looking bad. I know you've been critical of the players. I'm talking about Nottingham Forest, but Fulham played a role here.
Listen, back in November, Russ, at the end of November, Nottingham Forest beat Liverpool 3-0, right?
Right.
You can't forget that, yeah? Then they went and lost to Brighton, but then they beat Wolves, then they lost to Everton, then they absolutely murdered Tottenham. So the problem is that with Nottingham Forest at the moment, they've got this air of inconsistency, which we all know. We've suffered from it a lot this season ourselves. Okay?
Absolutely.
But last night, without any shadow of a doubt, whilst Fulham did a little bit to nullify them, Nottingham Forest, turned up or didn't turn up, as the case may be. And, those players, Hutchinson, Gibbs-White, Hudson-Odoi, Anderson, they didn't perform. So, if you don't perform and you don't get yourself up to those levels and you get nullified by the opposition and Fulham make it difficult for you, then that is what you're going to get, Russ. And they, as I said, they will be disappointed with that last night. Really disappointed.
Absolutely. Okay. All right, Tony, let's move on. Let's now talk about, I told you we would discuss this. You and I, the two of us, have been critical of Fulham's defending on set pieces, a lot on corners, just directly on corners. You already said they did well, so let's talk about it.
Yeah, so obviously they must have had a chat after the Newcastle game, and last night, Forest I think had a a few corners. We certainly only had one in the whole game. I can't remember exactly how many they had, but listen, they still have to, they still put balls into the box, and Fulham had to defend them, and we definitely looked much more organised, much more structured. We attacked the ball a little bit more aggressively, and we dealt with everything that came into those areas. So it was definitely much better. But obviously, one swan doesn't make a summer, Russ. So although, we did it, let's see if we can do it against West Ham, and then let's see if we can do it against Crystal Palace. Let's see if they've made those slight adjustments, and hopefully, we'll keep to get stronger. Obviously, he's going to stick with zonal marking because that seems to be the way. But that's fine. But as long as everyone knows their jobs and does it. And last night, like I said, we attacked the ball much more aggressively, and we looked a lot more comfortable.
That's the one thing that I noticed. They were attacking it. And that to me was, I think, key to dealing with a lot of these corners. So I would agree with you on that. I'm not a big fan of zonal marking, but if that's what they're going to do, you got to make the best of it. And I think Fulham did. And I think that's a good reason why I wanted to talk about that. Okay. Tony, let's go here. There's been talk about this. Jamie Carragher, I guess, made some talk about this. I don't get it, but in my time of watching Fulham, I've watched it a good amount. I've seen this call almost every single time against Fulham. This is a penalty to me. I don't think it really that anything's going to come from it, like an opportunity for Fulham. And did Kevin maybe make the most out of it? Yes, potentially. But this is a penalty. Did Fulham deserve a penalty? My answer is yes.
Do you know what? Jamie Carragher gets far too much coverage on Sky. That's what I've noticed. Listen, it's a penalty. It's a penalty. I mean, it's not whether they deserved it or not. It's a penalty, and we've had those go against us
so many times.
It's a penalty. There's nothing to discuss. He's kicked his foot. It's a penalty.
Yeah. Okay. And so it was obviously the right decision. And when we break down the match, we'll talk about Raul taking the penalty, because I think that was I think he's 11 for 11, Tony.
Ice cool.
He's great. And listen, this guy deserves a lot of credit. He's doing so much work for Fulham Football Club right now, and I'm glad that he gets to reap the reward by scoring the goal. So, but we'll talk about that when we break down the match. All right, Tony, it is now time for us to talk about something I told you we would talk about, because I think this is a huge talking point. We talked about this before the show. So I'm going to call it this: the conundrum for Fulham with Kevin. So we watch all the matches, okay? So we watch with our eyes. We obviously want Kevin to be the player that Fulham paid all this money for and be a success and turn into what Emile Smith-Rowe is now. Okay, we all want that. The issue is we're watching with our eyes. We are watching with our eyes. So our eyes are telling something's not going well. And there were some, like I said, there are some positive moments. Obviously, he creates, you can argue, creates the penalty. He's involved in it. He does go forward a great deal and looks dangerous. But there's a difference when you have Jaquazi out there and Kevin. I don't think Kevin is really where he needs to be, and it might just be an adjustment for him. But I'm going to share this with you because I went to whoscored.com to check out their ratings. And, Tony, this actually surprised me. They had Kevin as Fulham's man of the match at 7.7. And I thought to myself, what were these guys watching? Because that's not what I saw. But I think the big picture for Fulham is this is a wonderful opportunity for Kevin to take advantage of the time that Jaquazi is out. But how long can this continue to go on? Basically, the experiment of waiting for him to come good. Because I don't think they have much of a choice right now. Maybe when Seth comes back, they I'm talking about Fulham, have an opportunity to change things up a little bit. I want to talk about the conundrum Fulham have with Kevin.
Well, Kevin clearly hacked their system last night and obviously put his own stat in. And they obviously didn't watch the game last night because I think they gave Smith Rowe 6.4 as the worst player.
I saw that.
I mean, they clearly just made it up, Russ, as they went along. Yeah, look, I'm not going to be critical of Kevin in any way, shape or form. I think that ultimately, and the reason why, it's frustrating and people jump on it is because Fulham paid, over £35 million for him. But you've got to put things in perspective and we can't let our emotions get away with us, okay? At the end of the day, he's 22 years old, right? He's moved from Shakhtar Donetsk, a whole culture, whatever, to London. He's settling in. He's learning the game. He's come in with a new manager who wants him to play a certain way. He's got new players around him, new climate, etc., right? He hasn't had a consistent amount of games. And unfortunately, in the games that he has played, he showed glimpses of what he's about as a player, but he's also showed that he's got a lot of learning and a lot of development to do.
Yeah.
Last night, I thought he was effective, at certain points in the game. If you want to look at his, performance analysis throughout the performance in terms of impact, I thought he was lively when he was on the pitch throughout the time he was on the pitch, but also when he was attacking, he was unpredictable. So you never knew what he was going to do. Obviously, he's created a bit of magic for the penalty because he's got himself into an area where he's made the defenders make a challenge. So we've won the penalty from that. But there were other moments in the game where I think he was put clean through. And rather than using his pace to accelerate away and go for goal, he's cut back and made the pass. And there were other moments as well where, he had the opportunity to race past defences, but he's made the wrong decision. But that comes with a young player learning the game.
Yep.
In terms of his strengths last night, Russ, I thought his pace and directness were excellent. And I think that needs to be encouraged. He frequently got a Nottingham Forest, but again, made poor decisions.
Yep.
His dribbling and control is clear to see. And you know what? I think it was in the first 30 seconds, he put in a delightful cross.
He did.
And we want to see him do more of that, okay? We want to see him do more of that. And he will, as he starts to get, a bit more confident. And I think that's what it is. With him, it's all about confidence. Yep. In terms of his weaknesses, Russ, his decision-making, as we've talked about, that needs to improve. And that will come the more he trains, the more Marco Silva and his coaching team work with him. I think he's quite wasteful sometimes when he gets himself into areas. He's wasteful. He has a tendency to shoot when he should pass. And when he passes, he should shoot. And he needs to get that balance right. And the other thing that I think at the moment is really affecting him is his physicality. I think he lacks the strength at the moment against stronger, bigger players. And, he needs to get on the weights. They need to work with him physically. Yeah. And once he gets himself a little bit stronger and a bit more, physical, I think you're going to see a completely different player. So for me, at the moment, Russ, this is a season of embedding, getting him in, growing him. I expect to see a very different Kevin next season, Russ.
And that's why I wanted to bring that up. And I agree with you. And I'm not one that's going to say bust. I've already seen all the talk about that. No, because I've got a track record here of players that have come good. I'm going to even bring up Alex Iwobi, okay? Alex Iwobi comes to Fulham at the end of the transfer window, and Marco Silva and Iwobi have talked about the issue that they had that he came in so late. And then you started to see the player the next season. We're seeing the same thing with Emile Smith-Rowe. I agree with you. He's 22 years old. The ability is there. We can all see the ability. I'm glad that you talked about it. It's decision-making, it's experience. So even though it can be painful at times, probably painful, obviously, for him because he wants to do well, it's about getting the experience and learning what he can and what he can't do. And I think once he does that, then all of that will go away and we'll have the player. Jaquazi is longer in his development. He's older. He has gone through all of that. Kevin has not. That's the difference for me, Tony, because if you evaluate these two wingers, Jaquazi's the finished article. Kevin's not. But it doesn't mean that Kevin can't turn into Jaquazi or be even better than Jaquazi. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it's Chikwueze has that experience. He's been around a long time. He's an international, all of those things. Kevin, is 22. He's still very, very young. And as I said, there's a huge weight on his shoulders in terms of expectation. And I think, we're all guilty of, getting on it and letting our emotions come out and looking at it. And, I've been critical at times because I'm looking at him thinking this kid is, just not doing it and he's not going to do it. But you forget his age. And I think that ultimately, as I said, once he's had a season under his belt and, he's had a full summer in the gym, working on the weights, building himself up, getting stronger, I think that, with the ability that he has, you will start to see a very, very different player. And I also think that, once he gets a goal under his belt, Russ, I think that will give him a lot of confidence as well. So he's just, unfortunately at the moment, it's just not happening for him, in the way that he would probably want it to happen. But like I said, last night, he did win us the penalty.
Yes.
And he did have, certain moments in the game where he looked threatening, but he's just got to work on his decision-making and be a little bit more selfish sometimes and a bit more confident in those areas.
So I'm glad that we're talking about him. And I know that they're in a different part of their development, but you got Josh King at 18 years old. And everyone can see the ability. We could still see the ability with Kevin. When I look at Josh King, I think we all know or feel very strongly that he is going to turn into this incredible player. In the back of my mind, I still feel, because I've seen the ability, that Kevin can be that player too. It's just, I think a big part of this, you've already talked about it, is that it's the price tag. That price tag is hanging over this kid's head. I mean, we're all doing it. I'm doing it too. And sometimes we need to take a step back. And because I think you and I, and I'll say it right now, you and I have been proven right about Emil Smith-Rowe. We said be patient. We were critical of Smith-Rowe. But both of us said the ability's there. So I'm going to say to everyone right now, even though I'm critical of Kevin, because I'm looking at the performance and I'm judging the performance, it does not mean that I don't feel that he can become a great player for Fulham. It just might be next season. And that's why I'm calling this a conundrum, because you're dealing with the growth now. I think the payoff's going to be next season.
Yep. And all of those signs show that is more than likely going to be the case. Yep. As I said, when you buy someone that's your record signing, there is immediately an expectation. And, people would have seen his highlight reel on YouTube or whatever, what he did for Shakhtar Donetsk. But, it's a totally different league, totally different play set, totally different environment. And you know what? He does not have that luxury in the Premier League, the fastest league in the world.
That's right.
The most physical league in the world. It's a completely different game. And he needs time to adjust to that. And next season is when, people really need to sort of, analyze him and make judgment on him. And I'm hoping he will come good. I've seen enough to think there is a player there.
Yep.
Whether or not he can make that adjustment, time will tell.
Right. And I'm glad that Steve actually just shared this comment. 1 to 2 years, how much will Chuck, Kevin, and King be worth? And it might be a good amount. And again, I think that's also part of something that we have to consider. Who Fulham are in the Premier League, they will need to sell assets. And I think that they now will have viable assets to sell. So very interesting. Thank you, Steve, for mentioning that. I'll share this from Peter again. We might be better off putting Smith-Rowe on left, King through the middle, and then go Kevin as a super sub. Again, these are potential things, and I'm glad that you're bringing this up, Peter. Thank you very much, because I've been thinking about these things as well. Good stuff. All right, Tony, before we break down the match, let's talk about 75 minutes before the match began. What was your reaction? I know what mine is. I'll go to you first. When you saw the starting 11.
Safe Silva, Russ.
Boom. Boom.
Safe Silva.
Safe Silva, man.
Yeah, look, I wasn't surprised. I think we did touch on it, after the Newcastle game, and said that there's no way that Silva's going to approach this game with an attacking
No.
threat in midfield. So there were no surprises. Let's put it that way. It was
Okay.
pretty predictable.
Very predictable. I have to share this from Chris. Yes, Chris, definitely. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. Save Silva. Yes, he was save Silva. But you got to give the guy credit. It paid off. It paid off. Well, I'll give him also credit for making the substitute to know that it was time to get one of those two holding midfielders off, and that changed the match. So he actually looked at it and he made an adjustment. So he deserves credit. I'm talking about Marco Silva. Okay. Coming up next, Tony and I are going to break down the match. There aren't many moments to talk about, but we're going to do our best. Coming up next, along with ending the show with our man of the match. All right, Tony. First half. Let's get to talking about it. And obviously, the big talking point will be later on when we talk about the penalty. Because, again, when we talk about these halves, there's not a lot of shots to talk about. There's not a lot of moments to talk about. It was basically two teams just going back and forth. Fulham controlled the play, I thought, for the majority of the first half. But there was no real cutting edge there. And Nottingham Forest offered very little. Before we talk about the penalty, because I want to talk about that, talk about what you witnessed in the first half.
Well, I mean, as soon as the game kicked off, I think it was like within 12 seconds, Kevin's broken down the left-hand side and put in a delightful ball in the 6-yard box. But there was no one there. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, we've started so quick. We've come out the blocks. We're really up for this. And we're going to, take the game. And then literally on the minute, we could have had a penalty. I think, there was a bit of a, Adoy's got the chest, and then it's dropped onto his,
I thought that was close. I thought it was
brushed his arm.
Yeah.
So within a minute, Fulham could have had 2 goals. I mean, it was that crazy. But then after that minute, once everything sort of settled down, like you said, there wasn't much in the game. I mean, like you said, we cancelled each other out. The quality was really poor from both teams, to be perfectly honest. The transitions through midfield, the passing, we just kept giving the ball away.
The passing was horrible for both teams. Horrible.
Yeah, and so no team seemed to ever really, threaten. Every time Forest looked like they were going to break forward and cause us problems, they gave the ball away. Every time we looked like we were going to cause problems and go forward, we gave the ball away. And that just seemed to be the pattern, really.
Yeah. No, it was throughout that first half. I look at like certain moments. There was a moment like we're talking about with Kevin where Raul is about to pass it to him and he makes the wrong decision. I'm talking about Kevin. And you could see Raul's reaction. There was a bunch of stuff just like that happened in that first half. The same thing, like you said, I remember Igor Jesus getting in a good position and it goes wrong. Morgan Gibbs White getting in a good position and it just continued to happen. So it was both teams, like we said, canceling each other out. But Fulham were showing more, I could say, directness or more impetus to try to get that goal. And I'm glad that we talked about Kevin. We talked about the potential of Kevin. Let's now focus on him in the box and Douglas Luiz. We already talked about this is a penalty, okay? This is a penalty. It took a little bit of time for VAR to do the check, but it definitely was a penalty, Tony. But as you said, I want to talk about the goal from Raul because Iceman, I'm going to say from Top Gun, Iceman, this guy, 11 for 11. So let's talk about, again, real quickly, Raul scoring the goal that gave Fulham the victory.
Yeah, well, I think it was 45 minutes plus 1 or 2 minutes into injury time. Up to that point, Fulham actually had 8 shots in the game, but not one of them was on target. And that was compared to Forest, who had 6, I think, and also didn't have one on target. So that gives you an idea of how poor that first half was. But the one moment, literally just before halftime, it's a great time to score as well. Really good time because, that changes the half team talk for us.
Yep.
It changes the half team talk for Forest, and it gives a completely different complexion on the game. So, Kevin comes jinking him from the left-hand side of the box. He gets past Anderson and then obviously tries to skip past Louise, who sticks his leg out. And basically the contact sends Kevin tumbling to the floor. And it's a penalty.
Yeah.
Raul's, having to stand there with the ball waiting. The goalkeeper's playing mind games.
Yeah.
Gets booked for it, trying to put him off. But if you're going to have and it makes me wonder, how the hell was Andreas Pereira on penalties last season, Russ? When he
was there, by the way. He was at the match.
He was, yeah, with Muniz. He was. But
I know.
You're thinking to yourself, what on earth are you doing, giving this guy when you've got Raul, who's like unbelievable,
automatic,
and the minute he's got the ball in his hands, you feel relaxed because you know that he's not going to miss. I mean, obviously there will come a time when he will, because it's just the nature of the beast. But at the moment, he's your man, and he put the ball down, slotted it home brilliantly, and gave us an early Christmas present.
Absolutely, and I'm glad that our friend here shared this. There was one in the first half and one in the second half. There were a couple of headers that both went wide, but they're decent opportunities, but not, like I said, not clear cut. But they were decent opportunities, and things would have been different if he scored one of them. So Fulham go into the half up 1-0. Like you said, the team talk from both sides completely different. And you could tell you knew there would be a reaction from Nottingham Forest, especially with Sean Dyche. You knew, and I knew, and you got a reaction. We've already talked about this because you have that reaction. It wasn't working for those first 15 minutes. And as I said earlier in the show, Tony, I truly felt that they were going to score, that they were going to equalize. It just felt like it was, how it feels like it's coming? I felt like it was coming. Even though they were not really creating much, the pressure was telling me, oh, it's coming. But it never did. Thankfully, it never did. Like I said, they've got one long distance shot from Murillo and really didn't offer a hell of a lot. But what changed, and we've already talked about this, the subs for Fulham, we've already talked about Tom Kearney, but I think it goes beyond that because I actually liked his other substitutions. So give me your thoughts on what you watched in that second half.
Yeah, well, as we got to the 65th minute, I'm thinking, okay, Marco Silva's getting ready, G'd up for the changes. To be fair, I didn't think Tom Kearney would be the first person on his list to bring on. I genuinely didn't. But you know what? As I said earlier, that was the moment that changed the second half momentum. Yeah. Because the minute Tom Kearney came on, it was like Fulham suddenly got one hand back on the handlebars and then their other hand back on the handlebars, and they just took complete control of the situation. And, that is what Tom Kearney is there for us. That's what he can give you, and yeah, as I said, it was a great substitution. It made sure that it kept Forest, quiet in those areas, but also gave us momentum in terms of keeping better possession of the football, which is something that we didn't have in that first 15 minutes of that second half period.
Not at all. And it literally changed just like that. It completely, that's what was amazing about that change, that substitution. Everything changed. And I do like some of his other substitutions as well. It's funny. What do you make? We'll go to the very end. Again, he gets basically a cameo, but he does bring in Kusei Asari. And what did you make of bringing on Kusei Asari?
Yeah, look, I think, he's got to the 80 whatever minute it was and 85th minute and realised that Raul, has been absolutely flogged to death in the last 3 games. And actually, get a little bit of youth and exuberance on again. And, you forget, we've got some young players in this squad. And at that point, you had Kevin, you had Josh King, you got Kusu Asari. So, you've got some young players out there. And I thought when he came on, he looked bright, he looked lively. But again, he only got 5 minutes or 11 minutes effectively because it's 6 minutes injury time. So he's got 11 minutes. it's very difficult for a young player to come on and have any real impact or do anything special. So I'm just pleased he's getting the opportunity and time.
Yep.
The truth of the matter is, are we going to see enough of him, Russ, before he goes back to Bayern Munich? Probably not.
No.
But like I said, he brought him on. Raul had run his race and done
Yep.
what Raul does. He worked incredibly hard and got some valuable minutes.
Yep. And he brought in Diop, brings on Josh King. And the thing that frustrates me about bringing on Josh King, the way he's bringing on Josh King lately, is that I don't want to say it's a waste of this kid because he's offering a lot, but you've taken him from being a starter. Now he's coming off the bench. And listen, he did that with Emil Smith-Rowe. I hope at some point he becomes a starter again with Smith-Rowe. That when I always see Josh King coming off the bench, I'm thinking he needs to start, but also Smith-Rowe does as well.
But I think there's a reason for that, Russell. And I think that what Marco Silva has realised is that Josh King at the moment, whilst we love to see him, he's still immature as a footballer. And and I think that's why we've seen a little bit of a turnaround in our results, because what Smith-Rowe has suddenly done is he's actually impacting games.
Yeah.
He's contributing goals. He's having a bigger influence in the final third. And, you can't knock Josh King's exuberance and attitude and work ethic and all of those sorts of things, but he wasn't quite having the impact that, say, Smith-Rowe is having right now. So I think at the moment, I think Silva's actually got that quite right. And I think actually having King come off the bench and giving us that energy is better than the other way around. But as I said, at some point, I would like to see them both on the pitch together starting, because I think you'll get a completely different dynamic.
I want to see that. So want to see it. That's why I'm glad that we're talking about that. The one thing that I do want to mention, because we're talking about the subs, like I already mentioned Diop, but I do want to mention before we talk about man of the match is the situation with Harry Wilson. So Harry Wilson comes off. I've seen talk from Marco Silva that it was basically a big knock. So hopefully it's nothing major. But what's interesting, and I want to talk about this. So because the podcast I was listening to, they were focusing, I'm talking about from the Nottingham Forest perspective, that Fulham's left-hand side was taking advantage of their weakness, the right-hand side. Do you think that was by design, the reason why we did not see Harry Wilson have a bigger role in this match? Or is this just what happens in some of these matches? Does this have to do with Harry Wilson or have to do with how Fulham were playing?
I think it's a bit of both for us. I mean, there's been a lot of, Harry Wilson has played a lot of football, in the last few months. And, his legs are going to be feeling it. He's getting tackles. He's getting hit. And those do eventually take, effect on you. They do. And when opposition see you as a threat, the thing they're going to do is they're going to try and smash you as much as they possibly can. And obviously he took one last night. Hopefully, like you said, its impact, it won't be, too much of an issue. He's got a bit of time to recover now for the West Ham game. But look, I think that, again, the expectation is now when Harry Wilson plays, he's going to come out and score every game and be the main man. The reality is, he's going to have moments in games where he's not quite at the level, or, it doesn't quite roll for him or whatever. That's football. That's how it is. But I think he did okay last night.
Okay, very good. And I just shared that comment from Chris. He said, Sky said that Fulham were focusing down your left-hand side, Kevin. And they do that a lot, especially with Jedi back. So that's normal stuff. But I think that had more to do with Fulham than everything I was hearing about from the Nottingham Forest perspective. Oh, they're taking advantage. I'm like, well, this is really what they do normally. So I disagree with that. Anyways, good stuff, my friend. Let's now let's end the show with man of the match. If you're watching live, we have a lot of people watching live, 180 people watching live with us, Tony, which is excellent. Thank you, everyone, for watching live with us. Let's go to man of the match. Who was your man of the match?
Well, I was thinking about this last night in great, believe it or not, there were 9 yellow cards in that game yesterday, and it wasn't even that type of game. Look, I think Smith-Rowe was very close to it, but I hope you're sitting down, Russ, because my man of the match is going to be going to Joachim Andersen.
That's why I'm sharing this comment from Chris. It said, Sky gave this to Andersen. played a role in getting you a clean sheet. Okay. So
credit where credit's due.
Yeah.
I thought that, as I said to you, we looked organised. I think a lot of that came from him last night. He stepped up. I thought he defended very well. His decision-making was good. His distribution was good. He was in the right place. He read the game well. And like I said, clean sheet. Yep. I'm a very happy man when we've got a clean sheet. And he was a very big part of that. So for me, because of his leadership, because of his organisation, I think he nicks it for me.
Okay. And I could go with you on that. Absolutely. And I'm glad that our friend Combe goes with Kenny Tete. But I am going to go with Smith Rowe because I think that he set the tone for what we saw. And I think he has become so influential to everything Fulham are doing. Did it lead to a goal? Probably not. Did it? But I think he has really become, in his own way, a leader out there, Tony. And leading by example, not a fiery leader, but I'm talking about his actions are speaking loud. And I think what he's doing right now is only going to help Fulham moving forward. This is why Fulham paid all the money for him. It's starting to pay off. I'm going to give it to Smith Rowe.
Yeah, and that's a great shout, Russ. And like I said, he was up there, definitely. What was great about Smith Rowe last night is he looks so comfortable in tight spaces.
Absolutely.
And his movement is so intelligent at times. And, overall, he was solid. And I thought it was a very dominant performance from him in those areas. And you know what, Russ? If he carries on like that, he'll be knocking on the door for England soon, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
I don't think there's many players at the moment in his position that are showing that consistency and that level of quality. And I'm really hoping that he can continue to find that form, continue to score goals and be that influence. And I'd love to see him back in the England squad. Love it.
That would be great. And listen, it's always great that we could talk about situations. You and I have been doing the show, me and you together for second season, right? And we've been talking about Smith Rowe ever since. And it was a tough season last year for him. Let's call it what it is. And for some reason, he still doesn't play 90-plus minutes. What is up with that? Okay, what is up with what is that, Tony? What is that? But I don't think ever has, and that is mind-boggling to me. But I think it's nice to see a player because I think all players can develop at different speeds. And it's funny, I'm dealing with that now, and glad that our friend Chris, who's also a Patriots fan, brought up Drake May because Drake May was okay last season, and now he's great. Now he's great this season. It does happen. It absolutely happens. That's why I'm not giving up on Kevin. I'll use an example of a player that who he is, and again, I think you're going to appreciate this, and it never got better, and that was Andreas Pereira. You knew who he was. So there was no room. There was no, well, he's going to get better because he was the finished article to who he was. Kevin's not. Kevin's absolutely not. Smith Rowe, I think, I don't think he's the finished article yet, which is exciting, okay? But he's getting there. Even someone like Ryan Sessegnon, I don't think is really at his peak yet. He's almost there. That's what's exciting is that we get to see these players develop into the reason why people talk so much at Arsenal about Emile Smith Rowe. Hopefully, the way I'm hoping that the Shakhtar Donetsk supporters had him on our show talking about how wonderful Kevin is. Would I love for that to be true, right? In the end. So don't give up because I still think that it could potentially happen. But Emile Smith Rowe is a story of sometimes you need to wait and be patient to let the player develop at his pace, and then it comes good, and then you're like, this is what we had hoped for. But it was 18 months ago. It was 18 months ago that we had hoped to see it. But it is now, and that's the bottom line.
Yep, and I said patience and time are great things in football. It's just, sometimes players, managers, they don't necessarily always get it. Yep. But I think, as I said, we need to be patient, a lot more patient with Kevin at the moment. Because, as I said, there are glimpses, and I have no doubt that he will. The stronger he gets, the more he gets coached, the more that Marco Silva and his team work with him, the better he will become. There's no question about it. Yeah. Look, and Smith Rowe just needs to keep himself healthy. keep himself fit, keep himself hungry, keep showing that desire. And it's only going to be good news for Fulham moving forward. No question.
Okay. All right. Excellent stuff, Tony. Great show. We do need to wrap this up. This hour has flown by. I'm actually doing another show coming up shortly, which I'll be broadcasting live, but will be as a podcast exclusive on the Patreon page. This isn't, but the view from the Hammersmith end, I'm going to be talking again about this match. I look forward to getting their views, but I just want to mention one last time before we go. If you haven't already, and if you like what you're listening to and watching, if you really like it and you want more than just a post-match show or us broadcasting live, what's great about Patreon is that if you become a member, because I'm also a member myself, if you become a member, you say you want to listen to it on one of your podcast apps, you can enable that, and I can listen to what's on the Patreon page in my Apple app. I enabled it, and it's very easy to do. So you can still listen to that on your app if you become a Cottage Talk Patreon member. So please do check that out. Like I said, we'd love for you to check it out. It's simple to go to patreon.com/Cottage Talk. It's reasonably priced. Please do become a member. I think that you'll be happy that you became one. Okay. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. He's Tony Gold. I'm Russ Goldman. Thank you as always for watching and listening to Cottage Talk, part of the Talk Sport Fan Network.